Hey everyone, if this is your first talk with us, then welcome to the Product Marketing Festival. And for those of you that have already been tuning in, welcome back. We hope you will or have been enjoying what's going on, and we just want to take the opportunity to say thanks to all the sponsors and partners. And if you're not already signed up, don't forget to check out the Slack channel for lots more product marketing resources and discussion. Enjoy the talk.
Hi, thank you for joining me today. First of all, happy Friday. I know you guys have had a long week of great content nonstop. So I do want to thank all the speakers for putting together the content. And, first of all, we don't get paid for this, so anything we do here is voluntary. And I'm so glad to be here today to talk to you about win-loss programs. Before we get into that, just a little bit about myself. My name is Parag Patek. I'm a team lead of product marketing at IBM Security out in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Prior to IBM, I've had roles at other enterprises and startups, both as an individual contributor as well as manager. So experience is quite varied, led strategic initiatives, led data sheets, something as minute as data sheets as well. But, something that's close to my heart is definitely the win-loss programs for a couple of reasons. One, it gets you really close to your customer. And two, it can really help you build relationships cross-functionally. So with that said, I do want to talk about one of my favorite quotes of all time from Nelson Mandela. He says, "I never lose. I either win or learn." Now, how fitting is that for win-loss programs? If only our cross-functional teams could see it this way, I think all programs would be successful. So let's start and see how we can get us there, right? I think there are multiple steps we can take, and I want to share some of my experience along the way as well. So, how many of you have been in this situation, right? So you're at a company picnic and they're trying to encourage collaboration between different departments, and then you got sales and marketing here. Not so friendly, not so collaborative. And that's common, right? So think about, how you're introduced to your sales teams, and when you first join organizations, you're expected to work well with your sales reps, with your product reps, regardless of who they are. It really takes time, right? Trust is not given, it's earned. So you really got to build these steps up to really gain that trust of your sellers, of your product professionals, product management, and other cross-functional leaders who really are involved with the win-loss analysis. I wanted to put this slide here because I think a lot of the success of win-loss is really hinged on this relationship with sales. So let's keep that in mind as we progress. This is a good question. Should I even bother with win-loss analysis? The answer, it depends, right? I mean, if you plan to do it the right way, then yes. And by the right way, I don't mean a perfect way. I mean a right way. And really, when I'm talking about the right way, it's about setting the right goals, getting the right cross-functional people involved in the win-loss analysis, and of course, having KPIs that drive you along the way and learning as you go, right? No one's going to get it right the first time. No one's going to get it right the nth time. It's really a learning process that you just evolve over time and get better at. So I did borrow this image from our partners at Clouds, right? So I think they really put it in a good way. There are a lot of key advantages of doing win-loss analysis. Let's kind of go from left to right and really talk through some of these, right? So fostering strategic alignment, I think this is very important. Whenever you take on a strategic task in an organization, it is so important to get buy-in from everyone that's involved, right? Otherwise, you're just going rogue, and many times the impact of your work isn't as impactful as it would be if you had all the right stakeholders involved from the beginning. Win-loss analysis really gets you to get everyone on board because every single department within the organization has something to gain from it. So think about marketing, right? Marketing, you can think about your messaging, how well it's reflecting on your prospects and your customers. From a product management standpoint, you can think about, what features you might want to put into the next product launch. If you're going down the right path, get feedback on roadmap and so forth. From support, how well are support goals being met? What does the customer perceive your support to be, and so forth? You get the idea. Second, really around enabling sales and boosting win rates, right? I think there's a couple of things we'll get into here. There's two things. One is, yes, we can definitely enable sales based on what we learn from these win-loss analyses and really put that back into our messaging and our go-to-market assets to help sales better win or better position them to win in future deals. At the same time, let it be known that win-loss analysis is not a guarantee that it's going to boost your win rates, right? It will definitely improve it, But if you have that expectation early on, it might lead to many ignoring the win-loss analysis if you don't really meet those results. So we'll get into the setting expectations part later on in this presentation. I just wanted to make that clear here. Honing product strategy. Again, as I discussed, I think really, when you think about the market you're in, the trends you're seeing in those markets, and really what your customers are dealing with from a problem perspective, as well as what they're thinking about what's coming down the road. That's really where your product roadmap and product strategy intersect, right? So your prospect and your customers are a great opportunity for you to really figure out if the strategy you have in place today is really going to work for you today as well as down the line. Really powerful stuff there. Capture market and competitive intelligence. This is the best, right? So if you have a win, most of the customers are pretty open about talking about why they selected you, but it's even better when you lose, believe it or not. They're very open about what they didn't like about your product, your service, your message, your marketing, maybe you spammed them too much. This is a great way to capture market and competitive intelligence, right? And asking questions, which we'll get into later, that really help you as a product marketer figure out, what is driving this buyer, who is influencing this buyer, and so forth. Lastly, refining messaging and content. The people you're talking to are really your buyer personas, right? We always say as product marketing, know who you're talking to, who your audience is. Having these win-loss analyses is a great way for you to practice Mojito. For those that don't know Mojito, it's basically pragmatic marketing's coin term that means nothing important happens in the office. By doing these win-loss analyses, you can really talk to your prospects, talk to your customers who may be your target buyer personas and influencers, understand their buying behaviors, understand what drives them to buy, what really triggers them to see your product as a better differentiator than your competitors. These are some great questions you can ask, get the information, and bring it back to create content, as well as to refine your messaging for your entire go-to-market strategy. So in short, these are a lot of benefits if you do the win-loss analysis correctly. So I highly recommend starting somewhere and then evolving as you go. I know I've said this before, so for those of you who haven't seen my talk on how to become a strategic product marketer, one of the things I talk about is really, with great power comes great responsibility. Product marketing is always overwhelmed with so many different tasks and strategic projects that you have to lead, most of them cross-functionally, right? It really takes a lot out of us. I want you to understand that the win-loss analysis is really a very strategic project. And because it's so strategic, you have to get a lot of different stakeholders involved. You have to get a lot of buy-in. And on top of that, depending on how the program does, you're going to get a lot of eyes on this program. With that said, this is a great opportunity for you to really catapult your career, to show that you can take on the strategic work. But at the same time, if you don't do a great job and you just kind of trying to think of a more diplomatic way, half-ass it, it might actually work against you in that manner. So keep that in mind as you take on this particular program. All right, so with that said, let's get into top 5 reasons your win-loss programs fail, right? And this is based on my personal experience, my experience talking with other product marketers, what I've read about in industry papers and so forth. But, one of the things I mentioned earlier is I have both startup and enterprise experience. So I worked at IBM, where I currently work, Akamai, EMC. I also worked at startups, Lavastorm Analytics, and Pointlist. And the reason I'm saying that is because I wanted to make sure I capture the essence of a startup as well as an enterprise in everything we're doing here. So in my opinion, these 5 reasons can apply either to a startup, an enterprise, or everything in between. Again, the difficulty of how difficult each one of these reasons are may vary based on your teams, based on the individuals involved, and so forth. So with that said, let's get started with the first one, right? One of the first reasons most win-loss analyses fail right out the gate is really having incomplete, outdated, or biased data, right? Just to ask yourself, how much do you trust your data to make your decisions? I would really want to hone in on each 3 of these, right? So when you talk about incomplete data, what does that mean, right? So it might be the fact that really someone is entering data around a particular deal, but leaving out key details. So for example, when I was at EMC, and this is just a made-up example, but I think it gives a great flavor for this. One of my products that I was responsible for was an add-on product. And what that really means is someone sells the platform and then my product gets added onto that platform. So really my KPI was attach rate, right? So when you think about that, when you look at incomplete data, I might be just looking at the different attach rates and trying to make conclusions or draw conclusions using that data instead of going one step further and seeing why is someone buying that platform in the first place, and then from there digging into, what's driving my attach rate? Is it just because they have money to spend? Is it just because, the seller just wanted to throw certain products in? Or is it really that this customer cared about what this add-on does and really wanted that bundled in with the packaging? Without having that complete overview of that transaction and that data, it's very hard to say, and you're really just predicting at that point. Outdated data. I think this is really common for a lot of enterprises. One thing when I've taken on win-loss programs, I think it's very crucial that you're using the latest data. And it's hard to do, I get it, right? Because customers that are recent, you're not really allowed to talk to because sales reps protect them with all their power. But it's important because you don't want to be analyzing feedback from a customer who you closed 3 years ago, right? Your marketing has evolved, your product has evolved, the way your sellers go to market with your assets and your message has evolved. So really the feedback you're getting from that particular customer is a point of time feedback. So the closer you can get to today, the better, right? So when you closed this year, 6 months ago, 6 weeks ago, depending on what your sales cycle is, the more accurate information you're going to get to really drive your downstream activities from that. Again, I'm not saying you should leave out outdated data, such as customers from 3-4 years ago, but I would prioritize those that are more recent wins or losses than those that are outdated. And of course, there's biased data, right? So what does that really mean? So I think a great example here could be, I want to showcase that my attach rate was the best in the entire company, right? And that's me being biased towards my product. I might only filter, depending on what system you're using, filter on those that have the deals and customers that have a high attach rate. So when I do my win-loss analysis, by default, all these customers and prospects that I'm interviewing have a high attach rate, and that's making me look good. So yes, there is self-interest involved, but again, that data is not trustworthy. So making sure that you're really getting a fair sample of your data is so crucial in this stage as well. The other thing I think I brought up here, which I think I just need to touch on, right? So enterprises or startups, regardless, everyone has data problems. Some might have a CRM, some might be working out of Excel, some might have a very complicated CRM where there's multiple instances and you can't even merge the two. So regardless of what your situation is, try to work with whoever's handling your CRM data to understand where the customers are, and this is really where segmentation comes into play, demographics come into play, buyer personas come into play, right? Maybe you want to only make sure that you're not analyzing analysts, but you want to also analyze directors or CISOs or CEOs, depending on what your needs are. Mix it up, right? That's the best way to get a fair sample of what you're dealing with. So make sure you trust your data to the most possible capability that you can. And if you can't, ask the questions of the right people who handle that data. Second, I touched on this briefly, and I think this is a crucial part of win-loss analysis, right? And this is not because people are bad, it's really just the function that we're in, right? So there's constant lack of trust between sales and marketing. What are some of the things that cause this in general, right? What I've seen in the past and what I've seen other teams do, really it's us blaming each other for our shortfalls, right? And what do I mean by that? When was the last time we blamed sales for not meeting their targets, even after all those assets that we delivered? Data sheets, solution briefs, competitive information, discussion points, removing obstacles, all of these things. I gave it to sales, yet they still couldn't close the customer. That's really blaming instead of understanding why the deal didn't go through. And same from the sales side, right? Sales might always say, oh, that client deck doesn't really meet my requirements. I needed this slide to really close the deal. And that really distorts the truth. And many times, because of this distrust, sales reps are more likely to lie because they feel that this environment for the win-loss analysis isn't really a safe haven for them, regardless of whether the outcome is positive or negative, right? So I'm sure many of you have heard this before, but whenever sales lose a deal, It's often because our product is too expensive. Whenever sales wins a deal, it's because they're such an awesome sales rep. So while there might be truth to both of those statements, we really need to dig deeper to understand what was the real cause of whether winning or losing the deal. And how do you get to this, right? I think it's really about building trust. So as I mentioned earlier, if you haven't checked out my top 5 ways to really become strategic in product marketing, I presented that at the PMM Boston Summit. And one of those was really about getting sales on board, right? Figure out who those top sellers are within your organization that are not only rock stars, but also have an influence on other sellers. Figure out how to really get to them, empathize with them, right? Put yourself in their shoes and understand what they're going through, and then help them along the way. Once you win these individuals over and other reps see how well that seller is doing because of your help, they will open up to you as well. And this is a proven formula. I've done it many times and I continue to do it. I highly recommend you do it as well. So the key thing to keep in mind here is really make sure that the win-loss analysis is a safe haven for everyone involved to really speak their mind, regardless of what the outcome was. That's the only way you're going to learn and move forward with understanding where your shortcomings are and then fix them. All right. Third one, I think this is a common trap for humans, not only in marketing, but just in general, right? So when we think about questions, whenever you ask someone a question, it really can either be open-ended or a leading question, right? So what do I mean by that? So let's give a great example of top of my mind. If I'm asking someone to choose what's behind 3 doors, which door they would open, I might ask them a question, hey, of the 3 doors, which one do you want to open, right? And then there's no bias or leading question there, right? So the other thing I might ask someone is, hey, of the 3 doors, of which the 3rd door has the best prize behind it, which door would you want to open? That's a leading question that's really telling the person I'm asking the question to open door number 3. So the idea here is leading questions will get you the answers you want. But that's not the point of win-loss analysis. The point of a win-loss analysis is for you to really identify your gaps, learn from your shortcomings, and get better so you can be more competitive in the market. You can be a better product marketer, have better messaging, have better product roadmap, and enable sales better on where your prospects are, what's influencing them, and so forth. So the question you need to ask yourself is, are you more interested in what the customer has to say or convincing yourself of something that you're already doing, right? And this really goes back to actively listening to your customer. This is a great point to tell you, never go into a customer meeting without having a set of questions ready, right? That's a nightmare because you're just basically trying to come up with questions on the go. And yeah, you might feed off what the customer is saying while you're listening, but that's not really the right way to go about it because you want to make sure you take advantage of this meeting you have with the customer and be respectful of their time as well as everyone else that's involved. It's also important to make sure that all the cross-functional stakeholders have buy-in for all of these questions, right? So great questions to really ask here can range anywhere from, what magazines do you read? Where do you make your decisions about which product you want to shop for? What data points really help you drive a decision between 2 different platforms that are competing with each other? Have the customer pitch your product back to you. That's always a great way to understand, are they actually getting the message that you're trying to deliver to the market? All of these are fair game. I think regardless of what you do, having the questions ready ahead of time and making sure that you have cross-functional buy-in is the most important thing you can do here. All right, so I know I mentioned this a bit earlier, but setting unrealistic and incorrect goals, right? So right off the bat, I can tell you win-loss analysis isn't going to fix all of your problems. It will fix some of them because it will highlight the key areas that you need to improve on, as well as highlight the key areas that you're already doing really well in, right? So I think it's important to set that realistic goal from the get-go. Many sales reps view win-loss analysis as a way to really say, if I get this right, I'm going to win every single deal going forward. That's not the case, right? The idea is to learn to get better, but there is no stage of perfection. So you're going to keep learning as you keep doing these, and you're going to uncover different sets of data that will help you better drive decisions for how to enable sales how to go to market with different assets, what emails you should be sending out, what the content of those emails should be, and so forth. So that's one of the things we definitely want to verify here. The other, the other goal that you really want to set is really around KPIs, right? What are we tracking here? Is your KPIs based on how many customer interviews we do? Because if that's the case, you're really rewarding the wrong behavior here. If I was told I need to have 50 customer interviews in a quarter, I wouldn't care what customers they were. I would get data from 2013 and put it back in, right? So you need to make sure that the OKRs or the KPIs that you have set are fair to what you're really trying to achieve as part of this win-loss analysis, which is to learn. So another great example of this would be, just thinking off the top of my head here, how many wins do we have versus losses? Again, that's really biasing the data that you would pull based on the unrealistic goals that you're setting. If my goal is to interview 20 wins and only 5 losses, most of the data I'm going to pull is going to be cited towards the wins and not the losses. And believe it or not, you're going to learn more from the losses than you would from the wins. So just these things you need to keep in mind as you set those goals, and make sure whatever goals you set, you have buy-in from the cross-functional team and the leadership team. This is so important because you're not really going to get anywhere unless you have that buy-in. And the reason I say that is because your priorities change as product marketers, right? You need to have that air cover to really do these interviews, do that hard work of creating those questions, and then taking that feedback and actually analyze it to drive actionable insights from that data. It's a lot of work, but it definitely pays off in the end. But make sure you have the air cover to actually take on this project. Finally, really, in my opinion, the last thing that really gets in the way of a successful win-loss is personal agendas and misalignment, right? Are all the stakeholders involved in the win-loss program aligned to common goals? So yes, this does feed back into the last point a bit, but it's a little different, right? If you think about KPIs, those are set really to measure the success of the win-loss. Here, we're really talking about the human psychology of things. So if you think about different cross-functional teams, sales are coming at this from a different perspective, right? So if I'm a seller, I would want as many wins in these programs as possible to make my department look good. If I was a product management person, I would try to figure out who's using the latest version and get them in these win-loss interviews, because that way I can show all the money that we have spent, all the time that we have spent is actually really valuable. Look at this customer using all these great capabilities that we just released. From a product marketing selfish perspective, I would want to bring in someone who we brought in from a campaign so that I can say, hey, here's our campaign that drove this particular customer and it works. Give us more money to create more assets for this particular campaign. So there's so many different agendas that are natural to humans that can cause misalignment in your win-loss program. So I think it's important, again, as I said, to really gain that trust of the individuals across the cross-functional teams and really get involved early on in the win-loss project before you even start doing the customer interviews, right? I think that's going to be key. The prep work that you do ahead of the interviews is really going to help you get insights much faster and much accurate for what you're looking to do post-interview. The other thing I do want to mention here is everyone is contributing time to this, including the customer, right? It's important that we value our prospects' time, whether it's a win or a loss, right? They're donating their time for you to learn. Make sure you thank them, right? Whatever way you can do it, whether it's a free learning course, whether it's just a nice email or a nice gesture, whatever it may be, just understand that, this customer could actually be a very high value customer for you if they're providing this feedback now. Because later on, if you want to do a beta, if you want to do other marketing activity, you want them in your product advisory roles, you can really get these customers to come back and help you in many other ways. And of course, I think with that, the win-loss program, as I mentioned earlier, has a lot of benefits. Those could be additional benefits that you add on top of that. So there is this great quote that's out there, right? I think one of the things we can't forget, win-loss analysis is a process, and it takes time to get it right. Be agile, iterate, and learn as you go. I'm just kidding. It's not famous. I said it, but I mean it, right? So think about what I've been saying this whole time. It's really about getting the process right, making sure everyone's bought into it, and iterating and learning as you go. Eventually, it'll become much easier for you, and then you can take on more customers to really get a broader sense of how well you're doing in the market, to learn the different trends, to understand your buyer personas better, to shape your messaging, to shape your product strategy, to really help enable sales better, and the benefits are endless. So with that, I want to thank you, and if you have any questions, I will be online to answer them, but you can Slack me. I'm only a Slack away at Parag, or connect with me on LinkedIn. The links are right here on the screen, or email me. Either way is fine. Once again, thank you so much for your time, and I really hope you took something away from this course and the other courses you went through throughout this week. Have a great day.